And this is Let's Talk Call-In Radio. My name is Charles Schultz, and I'm here with the lovely Shelley Rugg. Shelley, how are you?
I'm great, Charles.
And also Mark Switzer.
Hello.
And Elizabeth Barnett. How are you?
Hello, I'm good.
Are you Barnett or Barnett?
Yeah.
Either. And just briefly, as our sort of introductory spiel, this is Let's Talk, getting to the root causes of the important issues of the day. This on-air community forum believes your voice matters and welcomes all thoughts and views without judgment. Please join today's conversation by calling 663-8492. That's 415-663-8492. You can also call, if the line is busy, 663-8317. And we do want to, hear what you have to say. You can call in anonymously if you don't want to identify yourself. That's fine, but keep it clean on the air. But our topic for today, I ask you, Mark Switzer, what are we talking about?
Well, we're talking about the ending of the use by the community of the property across from the Wells Fargo Bank that's we refer to as the town commons, and we want to make sure that we communicate as much as we can over right now and over the next while about how that came about and what the implications are for the community. We know that there might be many questions about that, and we need to respond to that.
And so can you explain a little bit, what was the genesis of this project, and what was it trying to achieve? What are we talking about?
Well, it's a long story.
You have 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Well, okay, 30 seconds.
What's the goal? Could you say, what is the goal of these activities, I guess?
Well, I think that the goal was a concept that was recognized by Jonathan Rowe and Elizabeth Barnett, who's here with us. And there was a walkabout in Point Reyes Station by community members interested in the idea of the commons in 2007.
I think it was about 2007. I think the effort, there is a concept of the commons, but I think, is this working?
What do we...
Look at that. There we go.
Thank you, Lions. Elizabeth,
Elizabeth Barnett speaking now. The origins of the effort around kind of securing more understanding and access to our common spaces was initiated out here in about 2007, and there was something we call the walkabout that was an organized perambulation of Point Reyes Station, where we looked at all kind of really taking a look at our shared spaces, which the notion we tend to think of public or private, but that those are overlapping often when we're talking about the commons. And it was a way for people who live here within the communities to kind of assess and understand what we have in common in terms of public gathering spaces and what the threats or impacts are on all those spaces. And we did that as a community. It was a well-organized event years ago. Some people probably remember it well, others maybe not. And one of the things we were looking at is buildings, lots, even things like sidewalks and bulletin boards and whatever that we all encounter when we're out in towns, to see what we could do to either enhance them or to preserve them or to, and identify them, to be aware that they are things that we all share as a local community, and of course that we have impacts that are coming from outside local as well. So, and I would also say that we were trying to get ahead of the change that we saw coming. I mean, there's been change happening here and it seems like it's speeding up, if anything. And that was 7 years ago. And
do you mind if I ask, what was that perceived change?
I think it had to do with increased tourism, more new businesses that changed the character of. There's certain businesses we could sort of track historically that people who've lived here long decades remember as being, oh yeah, I remember when that happened and how it changed. So there's
right.
I suppose everything but I think the town has become less, it's more self-conscious and more known, and social media has an impact and all that. So just the impacts of people
increased tourism.
Yeah. is one of them. But I would also say, there's the joke about Starbucks coming to Point Reyes Station. I think it's been an April Fool's joke out here or up in Tamales, but that they're, we don't know really. We maybe assume or hope or have the idea that somehow things will be okay in the future with what the character of this place is. I mean, the Point Reyes Station Village Association has certainly addressed that in their community plan. It's written in their sort of list of values, and they articulate that pretty clearly. Mm-hmm. But when this happened at that point in 2007, it was kind of reinvigoration of those kinds of questions and looking at what is the character of our town, who are we? Mm-hmm. So this was a physical thing, though, where we walked around, and that lot, the town, what we've called the town commons, is centrally located. It has a lot of impact, has always served at least as a pathway, and in other ways as well, as people will remember the Pelican Alliance from years ago and the tie-dye shop after that. And there was even theater there at one time years ago in the 70s, I guess. But the assumption that we would have access to that is an assumption, and then the thought that we might actually be able to reinvigorate that further was part of our effort back at that point. Mm-hmm.
And so this is Let's Talk. If you have views about West Marin Commons, particularly this property here in Point Reyes, do call us, 663-8492. And this has all come to a head. We read in the Point Reyes Light, one of our wonderful underwriters, or media, whatever, friends, that the lease on this property in the corner is not going to be renewed. So that's why we're having this conversation at this point.
Right. And my signature was on the lease, so I can give a little detail on that. So in 2010, the owners of the lot, with this couple that were in Tiburon, died in very close proximity, about 2 or 3 months apart, in early 2010. And they had purchased a lot by, Lions is giving me, I'm not being heard.
What would we do without Lions? Thank you, Lions.
Oh, thank you.
Give him a little more juice.
Okay.
Oh, I see. Well.
Maybe it's my deep little throaty voice, but in any case, we, local leaders, and particularly the set of folks that were at that time organizing the West Marin Fund, were quite interested in the whole initiative of the Commons that was led by Jonathan Rowe and Elizabeth, and they were involved with that, and they approached the owners, the new owner, which was the daughter of this couple that had died, because the property was in a trust that she became the trustee of in 2010, and asked if she would consider leasing it for community use. And she agreed. And it was very simple. The West Marin Fund entered into a 3-year lease with a 3-year option to renew at $500 a month, provided that there would be liability insurance, which was carried. And the West Marin Fund folk, which were also overlapping with the West Marin Commons initiative, asked that the West Marin Commons, as a initiative, manage the property for community use, particularly the Little Yellow House. And so that was the regime for about 3 years. But as the end of that initial lease term that the fund was holding came to an end, the fund had already pretty well organized as a community foundation, and they said, well, we really shouldn't continue to be the leasee, and the West Marin Commons initiative then incorporated as a 501c3, really primarily to enter into a new lease, which we did in January of 2014. Then there was again a marshaling of interest and some fundraising for the upgrade of the community of the property in April 2014. Ishmael Gutierrez and Inverness Garden Service were instrumental in really basically completely overhauling the landscape, and there was monies raised for the plants and other items that needed to go in. The Little Yellow House was significantly renovated by a number of local folks, and the new lease that Kinsey helped us negotiate with the McDonoughs was for 3 years with a 3-year option to renew. And it was $750 a month rent, which was still pretty reasonable, but primarily because the county also, through Kinsey's help, provided $10,000 a year to West Marin Commons, Inc., now the nonprofit, to help defray those costs. And so that was the regime leading up until December 2016. But in November of 2016, the McDonoughs did not allow us to renew. We didn't apply in a timely way. They wanted a higher level of rent. And so that we started to become on a month-to-month basis at that point. And in any case, that's been the framework in which we've been managing the property. And then through a process of this year, 2017, we, the local West Marin Commons and other local interests, have been trying to devise a better level of management that address some of the concerns that had developed over time about the use of the property. But meantime, the Maggie McDonough and her advisors came to the resolution that they were concerned about all the various liabilities of the property, and they gave us notice in early November to vacate. And
there's going to be a work day.
People will notice that we removed yesterday. We removed all of the furniture, if you will, on the lot, including the Jonathan Rowe bench and the great big stone, gigantic stone, which was interesting, and all the rounds. And it's a vacant lot again. On Sunday, some volunteers have come forward, and I hope to tend to the lot to clean it up, sweep the paths.
Are you still looking for volunteers, or is you?
Yeah, I am, and I think it's the amount of work, or it's not very not huge amount of digging or whatever, but I think it would just be tending to the commons, and I'm thinking more like about a 10 to 2 time frame.
This Sunday,
coming Sunday. So if people are interested, bring a rake, bring a shovel, bring a set of clippers and some work clothes, and we might just have a good time together, and we can reminisce about what the uses have been, and we can hope and scheme about what the future might be.
Well, do call us with your views on that property there in the corner, that Commons area, or as it had been since 2010, 663-8492, if you want to share your views on what it was and what it might be in the future. Shelley, what's your opinion?
I have questions.
Questions.
Yeah. Well, my first question is, what happens next?
Yeah.
How do we manage or deal with a property that's so central to the town that we now have no responsibility for, yet it still exists in that space? Or is a fence going to go up? That's my question.
Yeah, that's I think what is sort of the obvious question is what's next, and I can only speculate, but I think it's not entire speculation because we've had any number of interactions with them recently. As people might have noticed, there's been what are called monuments put on the property, which are little brass plaques that are in the ground that say something to the effect of, passage by permission, which can be revoked at any time.
Yeah, I see.
And 4 of those have been put in place, which is kind of
unfriendly.
Well, it's actually kind of more than one would need legally. But I think that it's likely that is the if I were the
owners,
and knowing what my sense of them is that they want to make sure that they have some liability protection. So those monuments are in effect a little fence. A liability fence, a virtual liability fence. I doubt very seriously that they would put up a physical fence, and I know that that admonition that's been expressed to them that would be counterproductive, and not that they were interested or even mentioned that was a possibility. I think they're taking stock of the property, and in order to take complete stock of the property, I think they felt like they had to remove its current use.
Well, we have a caller, and which we'll bring on. A caller, well, thank you so much, and please keep it clean. What is your name, caller?
My name is Stephen.
I see.
Try my best. Try my best to keep it clean.
Do. Well, what's up, Stephen?
You know, I want to question the whole thing. We call it the Commons, but I just don't, and Shelley said it was central to the community. I just don't see it as central to the community. It seems more like a visitor serving facility. When's the last time? It just doesn't seem like some place that lives and breathes for the people of Point Reyes Station. And I have other ideas as to where a real commons could be, but I'd like to hear somebody address that.
Yeah, I'd like to address that. I think that, basically two things. One, that's a private property that's been used for public purpose, and that's been an inherent tension from the beginning. So I think until and unless it becomes public property, then that tension would inevitably be there. But to your point of, does it best serve the community? My view is it depends on what you mean by the community. Is the community just the people that live within the planning district? Is it the folks that live in the communities surrounding Tomales Bay, because Point Reyes Station is kind of a commercial hub? Is it the region, because we live in a place that is a obvious backyard for the region? So I view that there has been any number of communities that have used that space, and I fully understand, and I've been it's been told to me in many different ways how it hasn't best served certain communities. And I think the challenge is... Yeah, go ahead.
I don't care how you want to define a community, near or far. I just don't think it is central to any of these communities. I think that it, like I said, one thing after another has become a visitor serving facility, and I think that really that's what it is. I mean, I might sit there in the afternoon and enjoy my coffee or a sweet roll or whatever it is. I could sit there in the sun, but that isn't what I really think of as a community asset. I just question it, frankly. If you ask me what to do, I'd tear down the Grandy building. I'd put a big square there, make a real facility where you could have outdoor events and everything like that. I just don't think... I think we need something much bigger. I think we need something more useful. It's just a little corner lot.
It was a sweet little corner lot.
Well, Stephen, until we implement this Grandy building plan, and I'm not saying I'm opposed, can we use your property in Marshall?
I just don't think it would serve the community.
I'm really puzzled. I've heard this line of reasoning about the town commons, that the intention was that it was to serve the local community. I'll call it the local community. At the same time, where Point Reyes is a draw to the entire world. We see, people come from all over the world to this location. And the idea that somehow a public space like that is to be exclusively for the local community doesn't make sense to me. I don't understand it. And I also feel like as a community, we would want to be more welcoming to world travelers rather than exclusive.
Well, here's
I'm sorry.
Stephen, if I may, just this problem. Please, somebody name me a business in West Marin that does not depend on tourism. And then people turn around and complain about tourism. Now, I remember, wasn't it that there were benches removed because they said there were too many benches in that area? And I talked to a person that lives here in town, and they said, great. Get rid of those benches. We're sick of tourists. But I just can't think of any...
They're not going to go away.
Well, I can't think of any businesses that would exist without them at this point. So
right.
I'm not really sure.
But I want to say something. Is this working?
Yeah, it is working.
Yeah.
Elizabeth.
I mean, we all have some sense of our ideal situation for, like your idea about taking the Grandy building down and making a big real town square. Each of us has some thoughts on that, I think. And your thought of, for me, and it's, I guess what I'm posing is that this is an ideal, but I think we have a role in being hospitable here, as you know, what is hospitality, and maybe we think of that as a business endeavor, but I actually think sort of like the Odyssey, where the role of a community is to say, this is how we do things here,
Right.
and we're polite people, and you know, the fact is that we are in a place we're very privileged to live, that also other people have an opportunity to visit. And
Steve, we can hear you there fielding calls. I'm just, sorry.
Sorry.
so I think, you know, we can't ignore the fact that we're part of this flow of larger communities, and it's an opportunity for us to say, and I'm not saying we've done the best job of this. I think part of our management discussions, our working group, was to address those more and more, and there's lots of conflicts on that. It's hard. It's a hard process because we tried consensus.
You mentioned that a couple times here, but you know, I guess what I'm questioning is whether we need another visitor serving facility, and whether it is our responsibility as a community to take care of that facility, and that's really what you're talking about.
I would agree with you on that, and I think not only that, I would say that we have other facilities already, like the Dance Palace. Are we talking over each other? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I guess so.
Oh, wait, so you were saying, though, Elizabeth.
Well,
sorry,
I mean,
Stephen.
I think that the interesting thing to me about that very little corner lot is how it's such a microcosm of everything else. Yes, the impacts are there, but the impacts are there all the way up and down the street, and they're on, you know, at Toby's and at other private properties. So these things, the issues that have arisen on that space, are things that we do need to address, you know, and we can do a better job of that. So it's not simply about that particular parcel.
Do you want a sort of final word there, Stephen? I'm sorry, but did I cut you off, Mark?
No,
Oh.
I think I said what I need to say, and so I guess there's a final word. I was saving the final word for you.
Stephen, you old softy. Well, thank you so much for calling, and we will see you soon.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.
And the number is 663-8492. If that's busy, you can call 663-8317. Please do call in on this topic. I think I cut you off, Mark. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to add that, you know, expanding on what Elizabeth was mentioning about it being a microcosm of what our challenges are, I would urge the community to think about the town of Point Reyes Station as a commons. Yes, there's a lot of commercial activity in it, but there's also a lot of common spaces that we use. And it is, for better or worse, you know, if you like it or you don't, it is, in fact, a really important place for this region. You know, in many, many ways, West Marin is the backyard of the Bay Area. And, you know, we have huge benefit because of that. It does maintain core businesses that are not branded, you know, international. Well, there's one international business now. But in any case, I think those of us that live here we're really privileged to be here, and that there is economic vitality, and yes, it's challenging. And the other thing I would say about the history this last 7 years of the use of that space, we have learned a huge amount. You know, we have really made big mistakes there. You know, there have been events that have been overwhelming. There has been just management issues that are very difficult. And we've had a lot of successes. You know, my personal thing that I most enjoyed about the history there was that it became a space where the Latino community felt like they could have a presence within the town that's of their own sensibility. You know, the Latino community, the cultural history, you know, is about fiesta, and they've conducted major fiestas in the middle of town. And I think that was a very important social development in town. So there's many aspects of what's occurred there, and I think we've learned a lot about the successes and some of the challenges.
That's Mark Switzer. My name is Charles Schultz. I'm here with Shelley Rugg and Elizabeth Barnet. We're talking about the common space there on the corner of Highway 1 in Point Reyes Station, and its future, what's going to happen with it. If you have opinions or thoughts on this, please give us a call, 663-8492. I want to, we had a little debate with Stephen on the phone. What does the word community mean? Do you worry that community has become a brand? It's just something you slap on everything, and you use that to raise money or sell a product or do something. Is that a problem? I don't know. Shelley, Elizabeth, anybody want to? Oh, look at that! A caller, please.
You want me to respond, or you want to?
Please, no, caller. Just allow Elizabeth to respond, and we'll bring you on.
Well, I think that's been a problem with the word for a long time, many years, and in many contexts. The one definition that I adopted around that word is that it be actually placed in a physical place. So the fact that we're talking about a physical location gives it the word community some grounding. But the fact is that it's a dangerous word, and it's kind of lost its meaning at times.
Mm-hmm. And we do have a caller. Caller, you're on the air. Keep it clean. What's your name?
Ana Maria.
Maria.
Ana Maria.
Ana Maria.
Yes. Very interesting topic you have this morning. I like the way it is, when they put all these place to people sit down. They have a little recess and the traveling. And, of course, they raise the local businesses in there. And they look beautiful, looks kind of charming. Look at all these people. And I know the first thing I start hearing is the problem with the trash. And why don't charge to the people stops on the Vine, on the Palace Market or wherever to get their food, to make a little extra charge, and that can go exactly to the extra pick up the trash. One more time, extra time, or 2 times, depends on needed, and I think that there will be a solution. In Europe, if you go to the cafe and they ask you want to go or you want to use a table. If you use a table in the patio, they charge you. And with a purpose, I guess.
What do you think about that?
That's one of the things I'm thinking.
Ana Maria, this is Mark. I should tell you that the Palace Market has been very generous in helping manage the trash situation. Their staff, particularly when they've been running the barbecue, and over time, there have been dollar donations. For example, the Palace Market ran a 10% donation day when we were doing the upgrade of the property, and I think that raised something like $1,700. But more importantly, over the course of the last 6 or 7 months, as we were developing a new management plan that we attempted to put in place, or want to still put in place, we had I had interaction with any number of businesses on Main Street, and particularly the food purveyors, and they all expressed a ready interest in contributing to its management going forward. So the point being is that I take your point that there is a value to that the businesses have in having a space like that, and there's a need for that. It just needs to be organized in a way where it can be appropriately applied. And unfortunately, we're not there yet. But I truly believe that it's in all likelihood that piece of property can be acquired by the community or by the public. It may be in the form of a county purchase, and then it can be managed potentially by something like a community service district. Or there's another mechanism that I think would work in this town, what's called a business interest district, which is more of an informal agreement amongst businesses. So I think there's any number of ways where it could be more effectively managed for visitors going forward.
Yeah. And I don't know, you was mentioning about the Latino using that place, which is joy for the whole town.
Yes.
And also, when the tables were there, the picnic tables, I noticed a lot of people who works around, they have the break, and they go and sit down and stretch their legs a little bit and have their lunch, and it's a benefit for them.
Yes.
Right.
If they remove the tables, they don't have only the car. They go back to the car, sit there for the break, and then go back to work.
So for now, we've lost the opportunity to troubleshoot how to solve the issues with the commons, but how likely is it that we could purchase that property?
If you forgive me just one second, Mark, and thank you, Anna Maria. I just
and then if something happens, don't call any more common, because it's not going to be common. There will be more property, private property.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for calling.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Anna Maria. And we have a few announcements. And Mark, I'll ask you to pick that statement up as soon as I'm done. KWMR is supported by our listeners, members, and by Marin Agricultural Land Trust, a member-supported nonprofit organization working to preserve Marin County farmland, on the web at malt.org. That's MALT.org. Support is also provided by Whistle Stop, providing support and transportation services for older adults and people living with disabilities in Marin County. Whistle Stop's Active Aging Center provides meals, classes, multicultural gatherings, information, and referral services. Online at whistlestop.org. Finally, did you know that KWMR archives all locally produced programs? These archives are available through the KWMR website. Click on Radio Archives to stream your favorite shows. This is Let's Talk, and if you want to call in to talk about the West Marin Commons and the property there in downtown Point Reyes, the number is 663-8492, but I think I cut you off, Mark, or I cut somebody off, so somebody say something.
Well, actually, I forget exactly what.
So the question is, what is the likelihood of owning that property?
From my point of view, it's not likely. It's inevitable that property will be acquired by the community in one form or another. And, having said that, how, when, in what manner, I cannot say. It's just, to me, it's the highest and best use is for a piece of property.
Right.
That it's centrally located, and it would readily serve a number of interests, and it would be a challenge to effectively manage. But that's, I think we are, because of the work that this working group has devised for its management plan going forward, based on our experience in the past, I think we can come up with some solutions there that will be better managed and best serving the mixed kind of uses that have occurred there. One idea, just to give you a sense of that, we know that, well, if you think of that place as a welcome mat, as instead of, say, a doormat, if you don't mind my metaphors, I think it could be a very important welcoming mat to visitors, because there's a real need about visitors who point to West Marin to understand where there are resources to recreate, if you will. We have very limited public bathrooms. There's really not much understanding of where the main park facilities are. There's a great need for kind of an interpretation of what the history of this place is and what its unique characters are. I think the Little Yellow House could serve that purpose, not as a Chamber of Commerce.
Like a historical museum?
More of an interpretive historical museum or facility. So there's any number of possibilities there that will just require, a lot of input from foundations and also community sources. And so I just think there's lots of possibilities there. I'm very optimistic about its future.
Very good.
Again, you're listening to Let's Talk. Please call us 663-8492. Tell us what you think about this issue, and we could talk about, yes, the theme of hospitality in the Odyssey, opening as it does with Telemachus's visit to Nestor. But that will be Let's Listen to Charles and Elizabeth Talk About Books, which is on at noon.
Some people have asked about access to the farm stand, for example.
Yeah, and that's something that we really can't. We don't know what will be involved.
So you don't know yet whether there's a plan to put up some kind of blockade, fencing?
No, I don't know at all. And my expectation, based on my experience with the sensibilities of the owners, is that they're very cautious about what they do, and that could be an issue, and it may not be an issue. I just don't know. And because that's on Celine's property, that's entirely a matter between Celine and.
So if necessary, they might be able to reroute an entrance to that.
I don't know
if they need to, but we don't know.
And I also know that that things change.
Right.
And there are circumstances that come about that require. Things that we would prefer not. One might prefer not, but I think there's other ways of managing what happens in town. It also occurred to me to say that this idea of a business interest district, for example, is actually very well established form. And everyone knows that the town of Point Reyes Station, if you will, is not a town. It's an unincorporated area. And there isn't. I mean, the West Marin Chamber of Commerce is an effective chamber of commerce for the broader sets of businesses in West Marin. And the Point Reyes Station Village Association, has a very specific community plan which informs what we do or don't do in town. In the planning district. But there still is no, many of the other coastal villages have much more effective and specific legal forums to manage visitors serving as well as resident serving activities. This idea of a community service district is a mechanism whereby there can be parcel taxes applied towards community services. And so I think that there's been a lot of discussion, not just on the part of West Marin Commons, but amongst the business community about these issues. And we all know, I think, just from experience, that, Point Reyes Station used to be a place you pass through on the way to the park. Well, it still is for many people, but it's also a destination where literally people come to Point Reyes Station from wherever they're coming in the region, and they don't go out to the park. They turn around and go home. They've come for, tasting cheese or just an outing and with small children. Maybe they'll go on a drive. The point being is that we are a destination whether people would prefer that or not. Certainly in the 70s, one could sit down in the middle of Main Street on a weekday and for 15 minutes and no one would pass by, but that's not what's occurring anymore. So.
Right.
So if you have opinions on this, call us 663-8492. Does it strain the idea of hospitality, though? I mean, if it's a commercial exchange, if somebody's just coming to buy, is that really hospitality? Does that count?
Well, I mean, what I was thinking, I'm not. I don't know. I'm not familiar the way Mark is about the business. What's it called?
Business interest district.
Interest district.
Mm-hmm. And this would be a mechanism that would get businesses to pay into a fund to deal with these various.
Yeah, and even on a allocated basis.
But and in your description of historical teaching and as what you called a welcoming mat.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to mention the number of nonprofit organizations, in particular like the youth center and other efforts that, and even, some reference, well, there's been the Library Association has used it and, KWMR has used it and I think there's been some reference to the Dance Palace at that location too. So I'm thinking in terms of hospitality, part of it is having some consensus, I guess, about how we handle trash, for instance, or what we're doing for our youth here, or how, maybe there are some values that we all agree to more or less about how things are understood out here. And I think like the youth center has done an effort around that, or even how to, understand the trash. Mm-hmm. Where is it coming from, and why is it being generated, and the role of the commercial influences in our communities. I mean, at least that it would display who we are. How do we maintain this community? The fire, volunteer fire departments, or all the things. Even when we had the impact, say, from the fires in Sonoma, what we're neighbor to, and how those things affect us, or sea rise, or all the different issues that we have to contend with. That it be educational about those things, and that maybe we express some sense of what our values are.
Well, we've just been passed a note here. Now, are you going to read out? You're passing notes? Can we read this to the whole class?
There are 10 people, underline 10 people, trying to eat lunch on the porch of the little yellow house right now.
Because there's nowhere else to sit.
So there you go.
Squatting.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's also reminiscent. It brings to mind the fact that 7 years ago, that's what happened there. There was. And whatever was there was just placed there. Things have appeared on the town commons just out of the blue. Some Adirondack chairs just appeared one day, and so it's
wow.
We're going back to where we once belonged with this property. It is a vacant lot now, and that doesn't mean that it's going to remain that forever. And so I just think we have to reimagine our use, for the grander sense of our use of that space, and bring forward a positive view. We have a caller, right?
We do have a caller. Caller, you're on the air. What is your name? Keep it clean.
My name is David. I will, keep it clean for sure. Just hearing that there are several people trying to eat lunch at the Little Yellow House was also down at my store, which is just south of the Grandy Building. In the leeward side of the Grandy Building, there were 3 of the local homeless people who I guess have no place to go now either. So they were just hanging out there and eating some food, and they were here for a while, for at least for 45 minutes or so, and then wandered off. The idea of tearing down the Grandy Building and making the Zocalo down here, I think, is a great one, but it's not going to happen because I know what Ken Wilson, he's got plans for that place.
I see. Oh, are you privy to the plans? Do you want to give us a scoop?
Well, I know that it's moving forward. It definitely is, and Ken's sister is an architect. She she's working things through pushing things through the county, and it's going very, very slowly. As obviously, nothing visible's gone on here for quite a while. There is one thing that I wanted to say, which is, and I was always kind of opposed to the idea of having the town commons on that vacant lot because of the windage. There was, when I lived right downtown, when I lived on 3rd Street, right behind Cabaline, at that point it was before Marshall had developed the livery stable, and before Tomales Bay Foods was such a big going concern. And people gathered on 3rd Street in the lee of the Emporium, Cabaline, and that whole building. There were benches there. People gathered there a lot. There was very little traffic through there. Now there's much, much more traffic and valuable parking space for people who either work or are just need a place to park in town. Having something that has a built-in wind barrier is a really, really good idea. It's the vacant lot where the Commons has been pretty successful. I think it would be more successful if there were some kind of wind barrier whether it's and closing off 3rd Street at that point would have been possible, or at least closing off the east half of it would have been possible to make a park there. There were skaters, skateboarders that were there a lot every afternoon, so it was a place that people wanted to be, young people wanted to be. There weren't any problem. I mean, I lived right there. I lived in the house right there, so I watched it all, and it was really pretty nice because it was just a de facto gathering place for people.
Mm-hmm. So, David, you're saying you liked having the commons area there on the corner, and you'd like to have that back, or some version thereof?
Well, you mean where the one that's just been dismantled?
Yes.
Well, I think that's the only possibility now for town here. I don't see another place that's centrally located, easy. That's right close to where all the food is sold, so people can buy food and then go sit down there. Mm-hmm. I think it's a good spot in that way. The wind is the only issue that I.
David, because the picnic tables were removed at the beginning of the summer, and we did see a significant reduction in the trash on that spot, which is so obvious a place to go. But I think people know and are discovering, and if we had better signage, would realize that there are other picnicking places in town. The Cowgirl Creamery has a number of tables between the bakery and Cowgirl Creamery. There are, and on the other side of Cowgirl Creamery, there's tables that are kind of large tree planting structures. Yep. And with the advent of the side street kitchen, I'm imagining that and the Palace will probably be interested in trying to figure out how to accommodate some of their customers. So my point is that I really believe that locals should think of the town again as a totality. There are diverse places, and the Peace Garden now has picnic tables. So by dispersing that kind of use of the area of the town, I think that's actually a benefit that we're going to see with the current removal of the picnic tables from the town commons. We in the working group, we kind of devised a design set of concepts that would be accommodating that kind of use of the town commons for lunch, etc., that wasn't so blatantly the place to land, with a lot more, maybe much larger tables or a table that would accommodate people to congregate in groups, and a better, more organic design. We don't want to talk about windbreaks walls because that's we don't want to talk about walls, but
right.
I guess the point I'm trying to make as I'm ruminating with you is that, again, going back to recognizing what are the spaces in where we live that will accommodate both day-to-day, workday use by people that are working in town and the visitors that come. So I don't know if that speaks to what you're bringing up.
I think that obviously all of those are necessary. People come from all over the world, and I'm a big witness to that because there's a sign in the Chamber of Commerce Visitor Center that says, if you need information, come to me, and I talk to people from all over the world who come in on a regular basis. And so they need places and or a place, and it's the having a Zocalo, having a central park that's right in town. I think it's a great thing. Every Mexican town has one.
Yeah. Well, we were early on inspired by the concept of Zocalo because Jonathan Rowe, who was sort of one of he was one of the kind of intellectual innovators of the idea here. And Jonathan grew up in a New England town, Gloucester, I think it was Gloucester,
somewhere on the Cape.
No, it's north. Gloucester's north.
Yeah.
No, I think it was on the Cape.
Oh, maybe the Cape. Okay. And in any case, he experienced, in his youth and his youth, the importance of a sense of community where people knew where to gather, and that there were all from coffee shops to common spaces outside. So he recognized that as an important part of life, and he wrote about it extensively for national journals. And if people are really interested in his work, there's a great website, jonathanrowe.org, where a lot of his writings are archived.
And radio shows, because he had a regular radio show here.
Mm-hmm. And I'm going to sign off and free up the line. Thank you very much for this discussion.
Bye, David.
Thanks for calling.
Thank you, David. The number, we've got about 5 more minutes. The number is 663-8492 if you want to be heard on this issue. I interrupt you, Mark. I want to ask Mark and Elizabeth, so what do you want or think if people want to participate or get involved in this, what can they do?
Yeah. Well, my intention is to keep a conversation going on about the concept of the commons in this place. And the way we can do that readily is through our website, westmarincommons.org, on the forums, particularly on Soapbox, because that's the forum that we use for expressing opinions and having a back and forth, substantive discussion, arguments, if you will. There's a thread there, and I intend to keep that going. And we also are able to send out a newsletter when we need to our some 1,400 subscribers, and we will use that media to continue the conversation, not just about the town commons, but about the concept of commons and the nature of community life in Point Reyes Station. I also think that KWMR is somewhat interested in carrying on that conversation when we're able. This conversation and one earlier in Swimming Upstream, where I was interviewed about the circumstances of the termination of the lease. So we want to keep the conversation going and fully intend to do so with whatever way we can through the media, local media.
Got it. And we do have another caller. Caller, you're on the air. What's your name? And please keep it clean.
You betcha. It's Lyons.
Oh, Lyons. Oh, how are you?
To affirm that KWMR is very interested in continuing this conversation. The more the better. And I also wanted to say I caught part of the PBS NewsHour on Tuesday evening, and there was a very interesting piece on Venice, Italy, and how it's overrun by visitors, tourists. Locals are moving away. Very similar circumstance. And I'm sorry I've had to dip in and out of the program, but I was interested, Elizabeth, in what you were saying about, that we have, I don't know, did you say the right or the responsibility to sort of be in charge of how we do things here?
Well, or to say how we do things, also to express that I think that can happen. And I don't know how we'll congeal, in the next phase of all this. But I do think it's good that people are interested, and there's obviously some underlying difficult subjects to work, continue to work with. The visitor thing is obvious, and the trash is another one. And then when David mentions what we don't know about what might be happening with the Grandy building or anything else in town, again, it kind of reinforces for me the sense that the conversation that happens at KWMR or online or actually hopefully in person about how to conceive of ourselves as multiple communities overlapping with some responsibilities and some privileges, that conversation is, really important.
Yes. Great. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much, Lyons Filmer. And we're coming up to the top of the hour. I suppose we might be able to sneak somebody in for maybe 30 seconds. You could call us, 663-8492. But I guess just with this last bit of time, if Elizabeth and Mark, thank you so much for joining us. If you want to sort of find some way of wrapping up your perspective or ideas, then we're going to
I wanted to mention, too, though, that there's The lease ends on December 3rd, but there are 2 events happening Friday and Saturday. Could you?
Right. The Clams annual gingerbread house contest is going to be featured in the Little Yellow House starting on Friday night, and I think the judging will go through the Saturday day. Also, the Path of Lights, as well as I think the West Marin Senior Services event is called the Spirit of Lights. In any case, there will be the caroling on Friday night and reading of some poetry. And, we will have possession of the property until the 3rd of December.
And Shelley, anything to add as we come to the top of the hour here? You want to jump in?
You got this little fuzz on your...
It's a feather.
It's a
a feather.
Gracious. Anyway.
Well, I just...
thanks for the visual for everyone.
I will hold on to the notion that the Commons as a community gathering and a welcoming place is a possibility for the future.
Inevitable.
Okay, I like that.
Well, and thank you
I like
again,
the confidence.
Elizabeth Barnet and Mark Switzer. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Charles.
And
everybody.
And get involved on the website.
Absolutely.
For starters, yeah.
westmarincommons.org.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Soapbox Forum.
That's right.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, Shelley Rugg.
Thank you, Charles Schultz.
Well, wonderful. And we will be back next week with another topic. I think Stephen wants to do recycling, maybe. He called to sneer. We'll see what he has to say about recycling next week. And I'll be back tomorrow with Paul Elmore, and we'll, talk about something for an hour.
Cool.
And I think we'll leave with Brahms, the piano and violin sonata. I think we'll do number 2, the second movement, which sort of beautifully describes the sort of deepening shadows you get with this winter light. I like it very much.